Hello again, everyone. I'd like to talk about the case of David Sneddon. Here's his picture right here. He disappeared, vanished back in 2004 when he was hiking in China. And then rumor has it flying around that he's teaching English in Pyongyang. He was kidnapped by the North Koreans and teaching English in Pyongyang, and he had taught English to Kim Jong Un. Now, let me first say that my condolences to his family. It's always terrible when you lose a son and a sibling like that. It's a bad thing. What happened was that he went hiking in southern China, down near north of the Laos Vietnam border there, just kind of east of Burma, Yunnan province. Here's a map here. And he vanished, he disappeared. And his family traveled to the area looking for him, his father and his brother, and they sent on a search party, picture of the search party. And couldn't find him, no sign of him. That was in 2004. And so about 7 years after he disappeared, in 2011, some human rights people popped up. These North Korean human rights people, which, in my opinion, some of the lowest forms of life on the planet, because all they care about is money. They pretend to care about human rights, but it's all about making money. They live on grants and donations. So make the money, and for whatever reason. So this fellow named Chuck Downs, here's a picture of him here. Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. And then another guy, this Choi Sun-yong, pictured here. And there were some others. There were a few other, 3 or 4 others that jumped on the bandwagon. But it was this Choi Sun-yong, I think, that said, well, he talked to a guy who knew a guy that saw David Sneddon in Pyongyang, and he's married and has a couple kids, and he is teaching English to Kim Jong Un. And so this spread like wildfire, and I just copied out a few of the articles in the news. I mean, this is like CNN, their brand of journalism. Get one source, an anonymous source that won't come forward for security reasons, and then you base your whole narrative off of one single anonymous, unnamed source you probably made up yourself. The story, and that's what happened here. There is no source; they made it up. Article: Did North Korea kidnap an American hiker? Another article: Was this American student kidnapped by North Korea? Lawmakers want Trump to press for information about missing David Sneddon, who is Kim Jong Un's personal tutor. Another one: Was David Sneddon kidnapped, brainwashed, and made to become North Korean leader's tutor? Okay. Report: BYU student kidnapped in 2004, now teaching in North Korea. Another one: David Sneddon, student missing for 12 years, was kidnapped to teach English to Kim Jong Un. And there's just dozens of these. But you see how it starts. It gets into the media, and it just takes off like wildfire. And, what are you going to do? So, where do you begin? So let's look at the facts, what happened here. Is that you just go back and just try to figure out what happened. David Sneddon was a Mormon missionary. I live in Arizona. You see these Mormon missionaries all over the place. Arizona was considered to be, not so much anymore, but was considered to be a Mormon state. There's still a lot of Mormon communities here. And so you see the missionaries running around 2 by 2 on their bicycles. They got their white shirt, their little black badge, and their kit with the Book of Mormon. They'll give you one if you want one. And they ostensibly they say they're Christians. You know, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're not Christians. They say they are, but they're not. Different theology, and it's all based around the revelations of a prophet, just like Islam. Islam has the Prophet Muhammad, and Mormons have the Prophet Joseph Smith. And you cannot enter heaven except if you go through Joseph Smith. You got to believe what he says. So anyway, so he was teaching. He's run his mission in South Korea, and David Sneddon could speak Korean and Mandarin, Chinese, fluently. So he wanted to go home, but first he went to Yunnan province because he heard it's a beautiful place, and he went hiking in Tiger Leaping Gorge, a place of Tiger Leaping Gorge. Just stunningly beautiful. And it's a big, like a canyon, a narrow-walled canyon. It's very deep. I think it's some of the deepest place on earth, something like that, when you're walking through this. And it's a 2-day hike, 16 miles, I guess. And you do it in 8-mile increments. And the trail is very precipitous. It's all this, it's steep and cut into the canyon wall. Here's a picture here. And you can see how it's cut. And it's wet. You know, it's going to be muddy. It's going to be slippery. And you got maybe this much room to walk. And then it's 1,000 feet straight down. And they lose people in the canyon all the time. It's like where, like I say, I live in Arizona. We lose 8 or 10 people in the Grand Canyon all the time up there. You go up there and look at it, and it's like there and then straight down. And it's so far down, you'll probably die of starvation before you hit. It's that deep. So he went hiking in this thing. Here's another picture of it, of the trail. And it's not something you want to go hiking by yourself. But his first day there, he met up with a guy that was leading a couple, a married couple, and he walked with him for that day. But the next morning, he got up and left early by himself. And according to his emails, he wanted to get home. Here's a picture of him. He's wearing a blue T-shirt and gray hiking shorts. And I looked at the very bottom of the picture, and I took a little shot of it, and I circled it in green. It looks to me like he's wearing low-cut shoes, and I hope he wasn't wearing tennis shoes. Here's a pair of my old tennis shoes. It looks to me like he's wearing something like this. You do not want to go hiking in Tiger Leaping Gorge in tennis shoes. This is asking for trouble. His parents said, well, David was an Eagle Scout. Yeah, okay, fine. David was also an academic. Spent most of his time in a classroom, not much time outdoors. And Tiger Leaping Gorge is not a nature walk. This is a tough gig. You want to know what you're doing, and Boy Scouts are always supposed to be prepared. David wasn't prepared. If he wasn't wearing tennis shoes, he might have been wearing a trail shoe. Here's my pair of my Merrill trail shoes. These are nice. I've had these forever, and these are usually what I wear to go hiking around the area here. But if you're going to do serious hiking, you need this. You need some real good boots with support, good tread. You see mine are worn here. These are a Solo, a nice Italian boot. And I've got 3 or 4 pair of these. But you need something that's going to grip the trail. Like I say, I've worn these so much they're getting worn out. And then probably right up there with the very best boots you can buy, these are my good backpacking boots. And these are a Solo. Okay, it's a good pair of boots. The tread is still there. I probably should get these resold. But I've had these for a long time. And, you know, I'm out a lot in the Arizona countryside here, in the mountains. I fall on my ass all the time. You know, 3 or 4 times a year. But I just slip and slide and skin up a knee or something, bang up my hand. But I'm pretty careful. I have a strong sense of self-preservation, but I'm going to wear the right equipment. And I don't think David was. I think he's wearing some kind of slick shoe. He went out. He violated the rule, always hike with a buddy in that situation. You know, I hike, oftentimes I'll hike alone, but it's well-traveled trails. There's people coming by, you know, several times a day. But, you know, there, I mean, it's, you take one misstep, slide on the slippery rock, and it's into the, you know, it's into the river. And that's what the Chinese authorities said. He probably fell into the river. But people say, no, he was kidnapped by North Korean agents. And evidence they give is that there's several Korean little inns or restaurants along the way, or little houses where you can stop overnight. And they said, well, look at all those Korean restaurants. Well, Tiger Leaping Gorge is an attraction not only for Chinese tourists, but also for South Korean. A lot of Koreans come there every year and hike it. So it makes sense to have little Korean restaurants, you know. When Americans go somewhere, they expect to see a McDonald's. Korean goes somewhere, he expects to see a Korean restaurant. Simple as that. But anyway, he vanished, and these human rights people come up and said, well, he had been kidnapped by North Koreans to teach English. Well, you know, that idea is really, really stupid. And I'll tell you why it's stupid, and why you know, I would be the most surprised person on the planet if David Sneddon was kidnapped to teach English. And they point to a guy by the name of Jenkins. Here we go, Robert Charles Jenkins. And here's an article: North Korea, Japan, and the abduction narrative of Charles Robert Jenkins. That's his name. And they said, well, you know, look at this. Jenkins was abducted to teach English in North Korea, and he has a wife and a couple kids. So if it happened to Jenkins, it happened to David Sneddon. Well, this is nonsense. Okay, what they said here, you know, the abduction narrative of Charles Robert Jenkins. Jenkins was not abducted. Back in 1965, Jenkins was in the U.S. Army, and he was on the front line there in DMZ. He was part of the guard troops or whatever, guarding the DMZ. And he was, you know, an uneducated guy. You know, I think he'd lied and joined the military when he was 15. So what kind of an education could he have? And this is in 1965, and he was terrified that he would be sent to Vietnam. He didn't want to go to Vietnam. So he got drunk with a bunch of friends one night, and I suppose he had 10 beers. It's a lot of beer. And he decided it would be a good idea to go across and defect to the North Koreans. Hopefully they would then send him to Russia, and then he'd be repatriated back home, and somehow this was supposed to get him out of Vietnam or something. I don't know what he was thinking about. So he went across, held up his hands, I surrender, they grabbed him. And it was kind of, I guess, a little rough for him for the first little while, because they didn't know who he was, a spy or what he was up to. So he probably got knocked around until they finally got the truth out of him, that he was just a defector. And there was half a dozen other Americans or so that did the same thing, American soldiers. So as it turns out, Jenkins did not teach English in North Korea. I mean, he might have taught, you know, conversational English informally, but the guy, very likely, he didn't know, and probably still doesn't know, the difference between an adjective and an adverb. I mean, what does he know about English? He can barely speak it. But he did become an actor. You know, Kim Jong Un was really, Kim Jong Un's father, Kim Jong Il, was huge film guy. He had probably the world's largest collection of movies, of film, just tens of thousands of movies. And he liked to make movies, and he made some pretty good ones. I've downloaded several North Korean movies, and I like them. They're well done. And incidentally, he actually did, apparently, it's an aside here, but apparently Kim Jong Il did kidnap a South Korean director, film director, and then later got his wife in there. And so he held them supposedly against their will. It's an interesting story, and I might do a video on it. But I've forgotten the director's name now, but the director made some really good films for North Korea. And then at some point, Kim Jong Il released the director and his wife on humanitarian grounds. It's all a nice story, except what I think is that it was all prearranged. It was a story, okay, fine, we'll kidnap you, and meanwhile, I will put so many $1 million in the Swiss bank account, then I will release you, then you go back and tell everybody how bad of a situation you had, and you know, it's good all the way around. I think that's probably the way it happened. But anyway, getting back to Jenkins, Jenkins had a very nice career in North Korea as an actor. He played the villain, the American villain, usually a general or something in their movies. And he was well looked after. He had a lot of status in North Korean society. He met a lot of, you know, he was invited to all the parties, rubbed shoulders with the elites. And during the time of the arduous march, when people were starving to death, Jenkins and his family ate well. They gave him a young Japanese woman who had been abducted. North Korea admits that it abducted quite a few Japanese people. And they sent them back, and they looked for them, and they gave an accounting to Japan a few years ago. They said, well, here's everybody we stole, here's what happened to them, we don't know what happened to these people. And Jenkins' wife was one of these young Japanese that North Korean agents had stolen. So yeah, they've done that. But Jenkins wasn't kidnapped. He was a defector. But getting back to the case of David Sneddon and the idea that he was stolen to teach English to Kim Jong Un, that in itself is just a lot of nonsense. And I'll explain why here. There's three main reasons why it's nonsense. First, the first reason why I think that David Sneddon was not kidnapped to teach English to Kim Jong Un or to anyone is that in 2004, Kim Jong Un could already speak English and speak it rather well, and he could, of course, read it. And this is, he attended school in Bern, Switzerland, I believe from 1998 to 2000 or 2001, 2 or 3 years in there. So we go back, I have a bunch of articles from his friends, his classmates, and they talk about what Kim Jong Un was like. He's very intelligent and a good student. Another student, he was very quiet, he was a nice guy. He had a talent in drawing and mathematics. He spoke a mixture of German and the local Bern dialect of Swiss German. Kim Jong Un did. He was funny, always good for a laugh, another student said. He spoke so on and so forth, and then what do we got here? What else did I underline? Here we go. He was shy around girls, another student said. He was a normal guy like me, his friend said. He was competitive at sports. He didn't like to lose, like any of us. For him, basketball was everything. And he spoke good enough German to be understood, but not outgoing. In other words, he didn't speak German all that well. And then when Kim Jong Un, this one woman said Kim Jong Un, his name he used was Pakun over there. That was his alias. And when he visited this family, they spoke English, not German. Even though the family spoke German, they spoke English for Kim Jong Un's benefit. And then his English was bad at first. He had a strong accent and he was given extra lessons. He also learned German and was okay in the basics of both, but just okay. His English got better, but not his German. So this was what another student said. So according to his classmates, Kim Jong Un could speak pretty good English in 2000, 2001, right in there. So by 2004, I imagine he's pretty good. And of course, he'd gone back home. So if he already spoke English, why are you going to kidnap somebody to teach him English? Second, which is pretty interesting, is Great Britain in 2000 reestablished diplomatic contact, diplomatic relations with North Korea. And in 2001, they put their embassy in Pyongyang, and in 2003, the North Koreans put an embassy in London. Now, interestingly enough, this is right from the British Embassy, and they have a program that they've had been going now for 10 years. And it's the British Council English Language Teacher Training Program. And what the Brits do, the British Embassy, this is a program right out of the British Embassy, is they teach English to English teachers in Pyongyang in North Korea. And so they teach the teachers, and in turn the teachers teach everyone else. And this has been going on for quite a long time. So even if Kim Jong Un felt the need to learn English, he wouldn't kidnap some poor Mormon kid from his family and have his parents grief-stricken. You know, I mean, not even Kim Jong Un's going to do that. Kidnap, and then the kid, you know, he's probably crying, he's bummed out, he's, you know, his morale is, and he wants to go home. And they said no, and they put a gun to his head. You know, you got to teach English to Kim Jong Un. That's not going to happen when Kim Jong Un can get somebody with a PhD that has studied English from the British Embassy, and that Korean can come in and teach Kim Jong Un English if he wants to learn. So you see how silly that is. You know, the Brits have been teaching English in North Korea for quite a while. And here's another article which is pretty interesting, how British trainers quietly help shape North Korean education. So the Brits are really in there teaching English. And why is it important, English? Well, back in Kim Jong-il died in December of 2011. And in 2012, Kim Jong-un took over in his father's place. And he did a lot of things right out, but one of the first things he did was make it mandatory that every student in North Korea learns English from the grade of 4 to the grade of 12. So English is a mandatory subject. North Korea probably has the highest literacy rate of any country on the planet. They're 99 point something percent. Everybody can read and write and whatever. And so Kim Jong-un says everybody learns English. And why is this important? Science and technology. This is what Kim Il-sung, you know, we got to raise the standard of living for everybody. So all the journals, all the papers, scientific papers, are pretty much written in English. It's kind of like the international language. You have some French and German, but to be widely, you know, people need to publish in English. And so that's the reason that everybody's learned English. And of course, North Koreans read English literature as well. Don't kid yourself. You know, they read Jane Austen. They're familiar with Huckleberry Finn. They read American literature and British literature and, you know, in English. But he said, yeah, everybody has to learn English. So that tells me one thing is that Kim Jong-un learned English at a young age. even though most everybody says, well, he was in Switzerland from 1998 to 2001, somewhere in there. There is some indication that Kim Jong Un actually was there much younger, from 1991. Probably came back and forth a couple of times. But yes, he learned English. But his classmates said, well, yeah, he learned English. It got better. So again, why do you need to kidnap some poor kid, 24-year-old kid, to teach English when? And I think the upshot of this is that these North Korean human rights types, like I said, I've got zero respect for them, because they're not about human rights. They're about making money, donations and grants and whatever. And for that, they need to get into the news. So they exploited the grief of David Sneddon's parents, held out false hopes, told them a lie. David Sneddon is in North Korea. And they get themselves in the news, and then they can file for more grants, they can plead for more donations, because in the end, for people like this Downs character and Choi fellow and all the rest of them, it's all about money. They're like these television evangelists, pretending to help people and save souls. No, it's all about the money, the lifestyle. And that's the issue I have. This is what's probably behind this. So this whole business about David Sneddon being in North Korea teaching English is just silly. The poor fellow, I hate to say it, but the poor fellow probably, got out over his skis. He was impulsive. He wanted to get home, and he's going down that trail, and he's going too fast, and he's not watching where he's going, and he puts a foot wrong, and before you know it, whoof, and he's gone. And sad to say, it's a sad thing, but that's probably what happened. And I do feel sorry for his family, but what are you going to do? So anyway, that's all I have to say about that at the moment. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.